In this video, we're going to study Chapter 7 of Book 1 of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Chapter 7, Book 1. This is a pretty lengthy chapter, so I'm going to avoid making many comments. We're simply going to read through the chapter together, and I'll stop at a few points to make some helpful comments and notes just to help you get through the reading and understand everything that Aristotle has to say. Chapter 7 of Book 1 of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Aristotle writes, "Let us return to the investigated good, to the good which we're investigating, and show what it is. For it appears that there is a different good in a different action and art. Since there is one good in the medical art, another in the art of commanding an army, and in a similar manner in the remaining arts. So each art seems to seek its own good." He said that earlier in the beginning of the book. "What therefore is the good in each? Is it not that for the sake of which other things are done by that art? Is that not the good? But this in the medical art indeed is health. In the art of commanding an army, the good is victory. In the art of building a house, the good that's sought is the house. And something else in another art. And in every action and deliberate choice, it is the end. Since all of them perform other things for the sake of this. Hence, if there is one certain end of all actions, if there is one certain end of all human actions, this will be the practical good. But if there are many ends, these will be practical goods, plural. The reasoning, however, in its transition, arrives at the same thing as was asserted by us in the beginning. But we must endeavor to render this still more clear. We have to go further. We have to make this clearer. Because therefore it appears that there are many ends, and notice he said it appears that there are many ends, and of these we choose some on account of others, such as wealth, flutes, or musical instruments, and in short, instruments. Wealth itself is an instrument. It is evident that all ends are not complete or perfect. That, however, which is most excellent appears to be something perfect, something that's final, where having attained it we can rest. That which is most excellent appears to be something perfect. So that if there is only one certain perfect end, this will be what we investigate. This is the good that we're seeking to understand. But if there are many, it will be the most perfect of these, the best of these. We denominate, however, that which is pursuable for its own sake more perfect than that which is pursuable for the sake of something else. That word denominate just means to name or call something. We denominate that which is pursuable for its own sake more perfect than that which is pursuable for the sake of something else. And that which is never eligible on account of another thing than things which are eligible both on their own account and for the sake of something else. In short, the completely perfect is that which is always eligible or desirable on its own account and never on account of something else. But we choose honor and pleasure and intellect and every virtue on their own account. Indeed, for though we should derive no farther advantage than what the possession of them affords us, yet each of them would be the object of our choice. Yet we also choose them for the sake of something else, namely felicity. No one, however, chooses felicity for the sake of these, nor, in short, for the sake of anything else. The same thing also appears to happen from that which enables a man to be sufficient to himself. For perfect good appears to be self-sufficient. But we call the self-sufficient that which is not only sufficient to him who lives a solitary life, but which is also sufficient to parents, to his children, to his wife, and in short to friends and fellow citizens, since man is naturally a political animal or a social animal. Man was created by God to live in community. And therefore man can't consider anything that's just good for himself to be the end, because man is not created for himself alone. Man is created for community, and therefore anything that is perfectly good or truly good has to be good for man and man's whole community. Aristotle mentioned that earlier in the book. Because man is naturally a political animal, or a community member, a social animal. A certain boundary, however, must be assumed of these things. For if good is to be extended to parents and their offspring, in other words, not just a man, but also his family members, and to the friends of friends, there will be a procession to infinity that will just go on forever. Where do we set a limit? If I say, well, this is good for me, it's also good for my parents and my children, it's good for my friends, but there are billions of people in the world. Where do we set the limit where I can call something good and rest and not think that I have to continue going and going and going? Because that will just go on forever. And Aristotle says, this indeed we shall consider hereafter. We call, however, the self-sufficient that which, subsisting by itself alone, makes life eligible or desirable. The word eligible in our translation means desirable or worthy of choosing. We call the self-sufficient that which, subsisting by itself alone, makes life eligible and in want of nothing. So what is that good which, if a man possesses, he needs nothing else? That is the perfect good. We think that felicity is a thing of this kind. Happiness is that perfect good. Besides this, we think that it is the most eligible of all things, and is not conumerated or numbered with any other good. For if it were conumerated with even the smallest good, it is evident that it would be more eligible, since that which is added would become an excess of good. But a greater good is always more eligible. Felicity, therefore, appears to be something perfect and sufficient to itself, being the end of all action. So, if we were to be asked, if you were stranded on a desert island and you could only have one thing on that island, what would that one thing be? And the answer to that question would be happiness, felicity. That would be the only thing worth having on that island, would be felicity. It's the ultimate and perfect good. If you have that, you have everything. There are proverbs which speak about the condition of a man who doesn't have food. It says a dinner of herbs, just a simple, basic dinner. A dinner of herbs where there is love and happiness is better than great feasting with strife and unhappiness. It's better to be poor and happy than wealthy and unhappy. It's better to be sick and happy, to be healthy and unhappy. our conditions in life don't necessarily bring happiness. And the only thing that we truly need is felicity. And therefore, obviously, finding out how we can obtain felicity, how we can become truly happy, should be the goal of our studies in life. It should be our chief pursuit, to understand how we can be happy. Now, let's just think about our catechism lesson for a minute. When children get started with the Baltimore Catechism, and we have to see just how richly the Church provides for us. Often we miss these things because we don't study philosophy, and we don't appreciate the teaching that the Church gives us because we simply don't have a taste for it. But the very first questions that a young child learns in catechism asks, why did God make us? And we ask this question about our end. Why did God make us? And we say, God made us to know Him, to love Him, and to serve Him in this world, and to be happy with Him forever in the next. God made us for happiness. The Church agrees with Aristotle that felicity is the ultimate good. But when we ask, where can we find that good? We're talking about two different kinds of good. Aristotle, as a philosopher, is talking about human good in this life, which is in our control, something we can go and get and possess for our entire lives. He's talking about human good, whereas in the Catechism we go further than that. We talk about eternal good, eternal happiness. In both cases, both in this life and in the life to come, happiness is the most perfect good. Aristotle, again, as a philosopher, is concerned with good in this life. But the Church leads us to enjoy not only good in this life, but good in the world to come. Let's go on with our reading. Perhaps, however, to say that felicity is the best of things is to assert that which is acknowledged by all men. But it is requisite that we should yet more clearly say what it is. And this is an important point Aristotle makes. I often notice that when I feel like I have something really important to share with someone, they act as if they already know it, because many of the most profound truths that we learn in studies are already known in a vague way by everyone. But the difference is that we should continue to study so that we really understand it clearly. We're not merely familiar with the answer, but we have a sort of mastery and knowledge of that answer. We have to know the causes of things. That's when we truly know something, is when we understand their sources and causes. So we have to be careful when we're familiar with the truth, as many Christians are. Many Christians, just by being Christians, are familiar with the truth. But there's more to learn. There's more to learn, not just to be familiar with it, or to say, oh yeah, I've heard of that, or oh yeah, I know about that. To actually know it, to actually know the causes and sources of things, is the pursuit of a wise man. So Aristotle says, everyone may acknowledge that happiness is the perfect good, but we have to understand this more clearly. Perhaps, therefore, this will be accomplished or effected if the work of man is assumed. And see here that Aristotle is limiting his discussion to that which is within the power of man. He's not getting into some crazy discussion about eternity or what God can do or any other sort of thing that's beyond man's control. He's asking about the chief good with reference to what is in the power of man. For as to the player of the flute, to the statuary or statue maker, and to every artist, and in short to those who have a certain work and action, the good and excellent for those men appear to be in their work. This also may appear to be the case with man, speaking universally, with man in general. If he has, as man, if he has a certain work, and again, this brings us back to what we saw in the Catechism. Why did God make us? Do we have a certain work? Is there a certain purpose for which man, all men, were created. Whether, therefore, are there certain works and actions indeed of a carpenter or a shoemaker, but of man himself, is there no work? And is he naturally indolent? Is man by nature just sort of idle with nothing to do unless he finds an occupation in the world? Or is there some task which man is given, every man shares, that's to be pursued, and the ultimate good would be found in that ultimate work of man? Or shall we say that as of the eye, the hand, and the foot, and in short, each of the parts of the body, there appears to be a certain work of that part of the body, so likewise of man, shall we admit that besides all these there is a certain work for man to do, just as there is a work for man's parts to do? What then will this work be? What is the work of man? For to live appears to be common also to plants as well as to men. But the peculiar work of man, the work of man which distinguishes him from all other creatures, is now to be investigated. The nutritive and augmentative life, therefore, must be rejected. That can't be man's work, just to live, for even plants and other animals can do that. A certain sensitive life will be consequent to this. It appears, however, that this also is common to a horse and an ox and to every animal. All animals live a sensitive life, live a life perceiving things, receiving knowledge through the senses. That's shared with all animals. That can't be man's work, to know things by sensation. A certain practical life, therefore, accompanied with reason, remains. But of this, one kind is obedient to reason, but the other possesses reason and energizes discursively. Since this life, however, is predicated in a twofold respect, that is, according to energy and according to habit, it must be admitted to subsist according to energy. For this appears to be predicated according to a more principal mode of subsistence. But if the work of man is the energy of the soul according to reason, or not without reason, and we say that the same thing is the work of the human species and of a worthy man, just as the same thing is the work of a harper and a good harper. And in short, this is the case in all things, excellence according to virtue being added to the work. For the work of a harper is to play on the harp, and of a good harper to play well on the harp. If this be the case, and we admit the work of man to be a certain life, and this to be the energy of the soul, and actions in conjunction with reason, but by a worthy man, these things are well and beautifully performed, and everything is well accomplished according to its proper virtue. If this be the case, then human good will be the energy of the soul according to virtue. But if there are many virtues, it will be the energy of soul according to the best and most perfect virtue, and besides this, in a perfect life. Isn't it funny that Aristotle comes to the conclusion that a perfectly virtuous life will be the chief good of man? And what does our Lord teach us? He teaches us, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Same truth, same truth. One taught by divine revelation, the other the conclusion of philosophy. For as one swallow does not make spring, in other words, when one bird appears after the winter, it doesn't mean it's springtime. One swallow does not make spring, nor one warm day. So neither does one day nor a little time make a man blessed and happy. Temporary prosperity does not make a man blessed and happy. Let this therefore be a description of the good. For it is necessary, perhaps as in a picture, first to delineate, and afterward add the colors. But it would seem that anyone may be able to adduce and distinctly arrange things which are well delineated, and that time is the inventor of, or good cooperator with things of this kind. Whence also accessions are made to the arts, for anyone may add to what is wanting. It is also requisite to call to mind what has been before said, and not to search for accuracy similarly in all things, but investigate it in each according to the subject matter, and so far as is appropriate to the method pertaining to the inquiry. For a carpenter and a geometrician investigate a right angle differently. The former, that is the carpenter, indeed, so far as is useful to his work. Carpenter only investigates that level of accuracy that's actually necessary for him to accomplish his work. But the geometrician explores what it is, or what the quality is which it possesses. For he is a contemplator of truth, seeking exact accuracy. The carpenter doesn't need the same accuracy as a mathematician. After the same manner, therefore, we must proceed in other things, lest what is superfluous or extra, unnecessary, should become more abundant than the works themselves. Neither must the cause be required similarly in all things, but in some, as for instance concerning principles. It is sufficient to have shown properly that they are. But the subsistence of a thing is the first thing, and the principle. Of principles, however, some are surveyed by induction, others by sense or observation, others from a certain custom, others in a different way. But we should endeavor to discuss everything so far as its nature permits, and should earnestly apply ourselves to define well. For this is of great importance with respect to what is consequent. The principle, therefore, appears to be more than half of the whole, and by principle he means beginning here. The beginning appears to be more than half of the whole, and many of the things which are objects of inquiry become manifest through it. That is, if we get the beginning or principles right, we provide the explanation for most of what needs to be investigated. And therefore, extra attention and effort needs to be given to the understanding and establishment of the principles and beginnings of an investigation, because they affect everything else. So, in chapter 7, as I said, it's a lengthy chapter to read. Aristotle gets down to a definition or description of human good, or the work of man, and he says, human good will be the energy of the soul according to virtue. That's the work of man, which distinguishes him from all other beings. And he also said the human work is the energy of the soul according to reason. That's true of all men. That's true of all men. The work of man is the energy of the soul, or the action of the soul according to reason, because reason is the property of man that distinguishes him from all other animals, and therefore the action of his soul according to that reason is what makes man man. It's man's work. But if we were to ask, how would the perfect man live, we would find that he not only lives according to reason, but more perfectly, he lives according to virtue, which is living according to reason. And so what is good for the good man is also good for all men, and therefore it's best for us to define the work of man as the energy of the soul according to virtue. That's the source of happiness. If man is able to succeed in that work, he will be happy. He'll achieve and enjoy felicity. And so that's the content of chapter 7 in book 1 of Aristotle's Ethics. You need to read this chapter on your own and study it for mastery, but I hope that this video provides you with the help of getting through the lesson a first time, hearing the reading, being able to see the important points and parts of the content of the lesson. And now it's time for you to study it and make it your own. God bless your studies.